In this video, I'd like to continue to talk about VS Code and Salesforce. There are many trailheads on how to get it installed. There are many trailheads on how to use it. This video is a little more of a tips trick in terms of working with Salesforce, VS Code, XML, and CSS. So the big three in web technologies are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And I think it's safe to say the web won. So learning those three technologies is really a good skill set. With VS Code being based on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and using Electron, and with the Salesforce CLI and the extensions, we have the opportunity to pull from our organization, our developer org or production org or UAT or whatever instance you're working with, we have the ability to pull assets down from the server. One of those at this time that I'm going to do this video on would be a custom object. So the custom object with Salesforce is basically a table. And in my prior video or videos, there's references to all this type of stuff as well. So if it seems as though this is a bit disjointed, maybe check out another video, or feel free to use the web to learn and trailheads to learn as well. So I'm going to kind of base it on a little bit of knowledge of a user, having an understanding that this is the browser, the org browser, and we can get to a custom object that was created within Salesforce. Right, so with that custom object, if we were to pull that down, we have an opportunity to look at it, to transfer it, to do other things to it. So right here, I'm in the custom objects, essentially folder, if you will, and this is on the Salesforce server. So I'm looking and I can see account, and I can see quote or opportunity if I've got quote configured. In this case, contact is there, so on and so forth. I created a custom object called lookup, SFDC test. I referenced this object in the other video as well. Well, as part of VS Code and the Salesforce CLI and the extension pack, I can download, and in this case I've already done it once, but I'm going to overwrite it. I can download all the assets that are related for purposes of this object. Now this is super great. This would allow me to transfer it. If I were to change my org, I could then transfer that object up to another org. So for configuration management purposes, code promotion, CI, CD, short for continuous integration, continuous development, new buzzwords, a couple of years old probably now, that have replaced CM, configuration management. Anywho, if you wanted to move this to another org without having to type it all back in, you can do that. Now, what happens when we do the retrieve from the Salesforce environment? Well, if we pop open the folder, we're going to see here that it has the fields that are available. So these are the fields that if we were to go into Salesforce proper, go into setup, go into the object manager, look for this object, and then click on fields, we would see them. Well, I just downloaded them with basically the cloud with the down arrow. Well, where to put it? Well, when we first created this project, it puts it on your hard drive in a location where you wish it to be stored. To get to that location, you can just switch from the org browser into the Explorer. And as you can see here, I created a folder. I called it DC3IT Sandbox. It's just a folder, and that is located on my hard drive of this computer. Inside the Force app folder, and then the main folder and the default folder, the files or folder structure will be available. So you're going to want to go to the Force app folder, then you're going to go to main, and you're going to go to default. And that is going to show all the assets you've downloaded or what is available to download. So I could download flows, flexi pages, classes, applications, etc. Lightning Web Components. In this case, I'm on the objects folder, and here's my custom object. Underneath there is compact layouts. So there's a layout that comes with this when I pulled it down. There's also list views if I created any. And there are the fields. Most importantly, they're the fields. So the fields that came down are the custom fields that I created. So I have here the customer industry, the customer SLA, the customer type, and pick list values. And those are the ones that came down with the objects. Now, if I wanted to refresh this on the hard drive, I can just go back up here and I can refresh to see the XML that came through. Now, this is an example of that XML that came through. And you can see custom field, full name, external ID, label, and if we click on the next one, it's the same XML markup, but different values. So that's starting to show at least a pattern in my mind of, okay, the XML that they're using, at least for the fields, appears to be consistent. And it's populated with some information. So what did I do? It's a little bit of a challenge, I think, if you wanted to manually copy and paste all of this information for, let's say, technical documentation. Might not be the best approach. Could you do it? For sure. Could you write code to do this and create technical documentation? Absolutely. And that'll be another video once I get the tool written to do that. But in the interim, I have a need to generate some technical documentation. I have a need to be able to combine the fields and be able to produce a table that will in effect show what this object is all about. And I need to do that over and over and over again. Now, this is a bit of a throwback to early 2000s, actually, where with XML, you can render it. XML by default will render in the browser. You'll get to see a default style sheet that will give you a tree view of this. We'll be able to see that here by going directly into this XML here. Let's hit our enter, and there's your default. And that looks exactly the same as VS Code. Now, how does VS Code know to do that? With an extension. So an additional extension you're going to want to install in your VS Code. Everyone's different. You don't have to do this. But if you want to have a formatter for your XML, I recommend XML Tools as the extension. There are many other XML extensions out there. I'm just using XML Tools. Feel free to try them all, see how they work for you. There's no right or wrong here. I'm just using XML Tools. So with that, this allows me to format the document, and then that way I can have my indents. I can have my ownership. I can know this is my root node for purposes of XML. I can see my start and my end tags. And for XML, there are two types of XML. There is well-formed XML, which is what this is. It's well-formed. And then there is something called valid XML. To have valid XML, you need some type of a validator, meaning a DTD, a document type definition, or an XML schema. In this case, we don't have any validation going on, and I'll record a different video for that. But in this case, we're going to rely on well-formed XML. We have start and end tags, we have a root tag, we have our XML declaration, and we do not have any tag names that are illegal, meaning having special characters, spaces, etc. Okay, so you want to be able to use this XML, and you want to be able to generate something that will actually look good for technical design documentation. How do you do that? There is one way to do it with CSS. There's other ways, but this is one way to do it with CSS. So how does that start? How do we get this from this look into something that is more tabular, if you will? Okay, my object is simple. It only has 4 custom fields, actually. As I said, this fields combined XML is one I created from the 4. So let's take a look at that. So I went in and I copied each one and I pasted them into a new file that I called fields combined. Call it whatever you wish. It does have to have a root element. You can call that tag anything you want. I chose to call it root. It's not a big deal, but you need a wrapper tag to wrap each of the custom fields. So I took the whole content, custom field to end custom field, as well as the values from each of the files, and just combined them. If new fields were added, if other things were to change, certainly could update. Now, is it extra maintenance? Yep, it's not awesome. But unless there's a tool that automatically does something for you, this is a nice way, a relatively efficient way to get some output and not have to grab one line at a time or try to fit it into something else. So one of the things you're going to notice here with this fields combined file, besides putting all the fields together with a wrapper tag for the root, is I created another XML instruction here, and that is for the style sheet. So this is the bit of the throwback part where this has been around since 2006, but I don't think it's used very much, and that's fine. It's nothing that it's super lost. XSL and XSLT are primarily more used to manipulate the actual tags, but I'm not looking to do that. I'm not looking to go down that rabbit hole of XML style language and transformation. Nope. I just want to render this out. But as we saw when we looked at the raw rendering in the browser, it's no good. It's exactly what we see in VS Code because I applied that extension and it's using the default style sheet. This is being rendered with a style sheet. The browser does not know what these XML tags are. The browser only knows about HTML tags, and therefore it can apply default styles, hard-coded styles if you will, to those tags. Now, could those styles be overridden? Yes, you can use CSS to override HTML styles. Well, in much the same way then, we can use CSS to override this default XML rendering. And our goal is to actually have something that looks like this, which we could then copy, paste, we could save as, we could do whatever we want, we could screenshot, etc. Well, how do we go from this, which isn't really actually the full tilt, but to this that has all these extra rows here? Well, we're going to create a little CSS. And I've already done that for us. So we need to have this XML style sheet tag, and this is the exact syntax you're looking for, angle bracket, question mark, XML hyphen style sheet, space, and then the href can be to the file any path. It could be on a server, it could be in, to me right now, it's in my same folder. It's in the same folder as all the rest of my fields on my XML. But I could take this combined XML and this CSS style, put it in a different folder, get it out of here, which would probably be a good idea because I don't want to muddy this up, and this would still work. So it doesn't matter where you put it, you just have to know to get the path to where the CSS lives. If you keep them in the same folder, you don't have to put anything there. It's just going to know to look there. So how does it know that? That's built into the browser technology. It's trying to follow a link. And that's what this is doing. So this is pulling in this Salesforce style CSS. You can call it whatever you want. The name does not matter. Keep the extension .css. That's a good thing to have. Why? Because when you open this in VS Code, it'll actually syntax highlight things for you and give you a little bit more control. Because it knows it's a CSS file, it's picking that up based on the extension, actually. Okay, so what do we see here in this CSS style? Well, these styles are basic, and they're walking the XML. So we know there's a root tag, and we have that root tag here. And that wraps all of our XML. So when you code fold this, it's the rest of the code's gone. Why? Because this is the root tag. And again, you could call this tag whatever you want. If you change its name, then you're going to want to change the name here. In CSS, there is a display property, and that display allows you to pick a lot of different types. One of those types is as a table. Wait, what? Table markup? No way. In CSS? This actually originated with Internet Explorer 8. Wayback Machine. But what it amounts to is using pure styles to format content as a table. Now, I don't get religion about technology. If that's heresy in someone's world, so be it. But if you don't transform this XML to pure tabular HTML, then rendering it with a style sheet is an option. And there's nothing semantically wrong with saying this markup can be rendered as a table. You have basically row after row with table cells. I'm not here to debate this. I'm just here to offer it as a choice, as an option. If you use display table, the browser is going to then say, oh, okay, I've got here as my root effectively a table. And now I'm going to wait further instruction to determine how to handle the rest of the XML. And that further instruction is found here. So there's other ways of doing CSS selector syntax. W3 Schools can train you up with the XML as well as the CSS and the HTML and even the JavaScript. This is basically saying go to the root tag, go to the custom field, and if it's the first child of that markup, which is right here, first child, off of the root, treat it as though it's the header. So this markup here, I copied and I just tweaked it to give it the names. That's it. I just took the name of the tag, put it in between as the content, the parsable character data, in between the start and the end tags, and that now is my header row. I tried to do it dynamically with CSS, and even though they've got a lot of pseudo selectors, I was unable to be successful. So I just created an additional block of markup and said, well, this is my header row. And that translates with this styling to basically a bold black and this aqua, if you will, background color. So if we go back here, there's your bold. Now it is coming out as blue, so it's not totally behaving the way it should, but that's because there's a style being applied later on, and that is actually overriding the black. CSS is a science unto itself. I've been doing it a long time. I still, I'm not that great at it. But this is our header row. So that gives us, right out of the gate, a header row, because we put that in the markup. Now, our next set of rows, if you will, so we can close up this custom field. We know that's our header. And we could even put comments in here. We could even, one of the best parts about XML is you can actually put in comments. And you can't do that, interestingly enough, with JSON. Now, JSON is the lingua franca of the internet and data interchange today. It used to be XML. And before that, it was EDI, electronic data interchange, maybe some SGML. SGML, standard generalized markup language, is actually the parent language of both HTML and XML. So XML and HTML are siblings. SGML is the parent. SGML came about from the 1960s. So none of this is really new, but implementation-wise, it's interesting. It's gotten better. Okay, so I just saved this header and this data comments here, which again, I can't make comments inside JSON. It's kind of funny. And I want to look and see if it impacted my rendering at all. So let's refresh. Nope, nothing changed, because the parser ignores it. It's a comment. Don't worry about it. Right. So this is again hitting off of my local hard drive. I'm not serving this off of a web server. There's no special magic here. It's the browser just rendering a file. And it's rendering that file because the CSS is coming in and saying, okay, for this custom field, root custom field header, treat it as this way. Now for the rest of these, let's take a look. So we come to the actual custom field tag itself, and what do we say about it? We say it is a table row. Treat it as a table row. If you've done any HTML tables in the past, you know you start with an angle bracket table tag, then you have an angle bracket TR tag, and eventually you get into an angle bracket TD tag for table cell. We're doing the same, but this is all with CSS. It's all with styles. None of it is changing the markup. It's just applying the style. So we're saying for the custom field, let's do a row. So as we look at this, because I folded this row up, here's another row and another row, and there's our rows of our data. So those are our rows. If I pop this one row open and I go back to my style sheet, it's now going to say, if the custom field owns the full name tag, well, we know it does because it's right here. So there's the parent, there's the child in terms of this markup. We want the font size to be bigger, the color to be blue. We want it to display as a table cell. And we're going to give it a border with red, and we're going to give it a bit of some padding around it, some spacing around it of a 25. Now you notice all the great IntelliSense that pops up in VS Code. This has made lives much easier over the years that this now has been incorporated. Previously, you would be hunting, and you would be going to the web, to textbooks, to wherever, to really get a lot of this information about these properties. You don't have to worry about that anymore. It's all at your fingertips. And if you wanted to dig even deeper, you can go to the Developer Mozilla website, where all this documentation is maintained. So as far as actually writing code these days, at least the big three, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, wow, really super helpful. We're going to repeat this concept over and over again. We're going to basically say off of this tag is the owner, the parent, and this tag is the child, set up another cell, set up another cell. Now, do we have to write them all individually out like this? Short answer is no. We could definitely concatenate them. I chose not to keep it a little bit more simplistic, because I think once you start to obfuscate things or make into one line, it starts to get more confusing for folks. Now you're going to see some of this is commented out. This is an actual CSS comment. So we saw an HTML comment, which is the angle bracket, and you could call it an exclamation mark, you can call it a bang. It's a little bit of a throwback if you call it a bang. And then hyphen hyphen, and you're going to end with the hyphen hyphen angle bracket. Not a course on HTML, no. W3 Schools or Mozilla or wherever else you like to learn from. But I've commented out display none. Why is he displaying none when he's got a display table cell? I'll get to that in a second. So as we go through, every single XML tag here is accounted for. And it's rendered out in effect the same way. Again, I could have consolidated it. I'll leave that up to you to change this type of a look and feel so that you can experiment. It's available on the web on how to do that. But when this is applied by pulling in this tag right here and applying this style sheet, the browser is now being given instructions. It's being given instructions that say, okay, we don't want it to look like this anymore. We want it to look like this. And thus you get your table. You get your columns and your rows. Now, as I look at this and I say external ID, I'm not going to need that for my technical design document. But full name, yes. Label, yes. Length, yes. Required, I think that's still a good thing to know. Track feed history, doesn't resonate for me. Track trending, same thing. No one's going to know what that is. Type, for sure. If I had dates or pick lists or other things here, I want to know that. Unique. I'm going to say no for now. Maybe it's something we want to keep. So instead of copying this whole table, pasting it into Excel, or putting it right into your technical design document, if you wanted to get rid of these columns, how could you do that? Well, that's what the commented out text was. So let's go back into our style sheet and let's uncomment our display none. And with VS Code, if you do a control or a command question mark or shift, forward slash rather, you will be able to comment and uncomment. So there's a lot of great keyboard tricks and tips as well with VS Code to make life easier. So I'm uncommenting these because I am saying, you know what? I don't want that. I don't want those columns. So I'm going to save this. Don't forget to save your file. Now, do I have to refresh my XML file? No, I don't have to save or do anything there. It's just my style sheet. So I'm going to go back to my browser and I'm going to refresh now my browser. And now I got it down to just what I want. So I can grab this, copy it, paste it, screen grab it, whatever you need to do to put it in your technical design document. It's available to you. You can do this over and over and over again, regardless of the custom objects, regardless of the other XML files that come down. So if you go back to your browser and let's say, oh, you know what, I built a flow and I want to be able to have that flow be rendered out in a table and I don't have time to write code to do all that, or no one's provided a tool yet to do all that. How could I do that? How could I get the flow? So here we are as flows. How could I get my flow for my pick list values, for my opportunities? Well, first and foremost, you're going to download it, right? So we're going to retrieve it. And now I'm overwriting it because I've already downloaded it. So there it goes up to the server, retrieves it, pulls it down, puts it into the path. All of this is available for you to take a look and you can trace. But then I'm going to go back to my Explorer. And I know I need to be in my Force app main default. And now I'm going to go to my flows because this is telling me go to flows. So there's flows. And there it is. Return pick list values. And that's the meta. This is the XML. So now I could write a CSS style sheet. I could add to this existing style sheet. Because if it doesn't find these tags, it's not going to do anything about it. It's effectively going to ignore it. So instead of creating style sheet after style sheet after style sheet, you could create one style sheet, and you could apply that style sheet to any of the XML that comes through, and you could render it as you wish. There's a lot of power with CSS these days because the browser has enabled that power, and the standards that have been placed through the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, has allowed that power to exist. So this is another opportunity here that I could take and I could go through and write some simple CSS using the same construct that I have here to then build out a style for my flow. I've already got a root element here. So this one is really going to be simpler because I don't have to concatenate the separate fields. It's all just here. But now I have different tag names. And I'm going to need to address the ownership of the flow to assignment steps, or to screen flow steps, or to decision steps, the different things that I have in here and that are being used. So this is an opportunity again to just use some simple style techniques to try and get data that could be rendered in a format that actually is useful. Now there's other tools out there, Power BI being one of them, that could potentially read this XML in and attempt to do something with it. Your mileage may vary. So if you know the content of what you've built and you can pick up a little CSS styling with the combination of this XML style sheet tag and the raw XML that comes from Salesforce, you potentially can generate your technical design documentation, your maintenance documentation, whatever you wish. I hope this video was helpful. Thanks.